Hey, guess what? I've got an amazing revelation for you. John Lennox doesn't like atheism. Yeah, I know, that's a big surprise there, but the reason that he doesn't like it might shock you, or maybe not. Maybe it's pretty obvious, but it's really hard to underestimate just how little respect these apologists get. But today, we'll see him explain why he doesn't like it, when the reality is it just doesn't coddle his fee-fees, because that's always a problem for the religious. But, what else is new? This time out, we get a twofer. Frank Turek and John Lennox at once. Granted, Frank doesn't really say a lot, so we're not going to make too much fun of him, but this is a tour de force of John Lennox's ridiculous religious views and why, as he says, he isn't an atheist. No, you're not an atheist because you lack the mental capacity to actually think about the insane ideas in your own head. This is just going to prove it, and it's not very hard to see. So let's watch John Lennox demonstrate once again what a complete mental piker he is. Because that's hardly a surprise, is it?
You point out that atheists have a bit of a problem. On one hand, they deny that evil exists, and yet on the other hand, when they see something like this, Dr. Lennox, they claim evil does exist. They claim that this plague is evil, or the results of it are evil anyway. How does their materialistic worldview put them in a bind?
Okay, first off, and of course, I can only speak for myself. I know I always say that, but I do make sure because I don't want people thinking that I'm putting words in other people's mouths, so I'm only speaking for myself. But I have never ever said that A, there is no evil, or B, that the COVID pandemic is evil or anything remotely of the sort. I haven't heard anyone else saying that either, now that I think about it, and it's something that's never actually come up before, because it's kind of a stupid idea. This is yet another straw man that Frank Turek is just making up because it serves his purposes, and that's not exactly a surprise. So let's get all of this out of the way up front before he goes running around with the goalposts anymore. Evil is a definition that humans invented. There is nothing inherently evil anywhere. There is nothing objectively evil. But we as humans do in fact use the label for things that we really don't like. This is where people like Frank just cherry pick his conversations so that he can get to the conclusion that he really wants to get to. Can I think that something is evil? Sure, I can do that. I can also think that something is good. I can think that something is beautiful or ugly or anything in between. All of those things are things that I've decided for myself, and you don't have to agree with me. Welcome to the wonderful world of subjectivity. Now, if someone did decide that the pandemic was evil, okay, that's up to them. I don't share that view. And that doesn't mean that either of us has a problem. It just means that we disagree in our opinions, and that is perfectly fine. It also means that Frank Turek is dishonest, but that's not exactly a surprise, is it?
Well, of course, atheists differ. And one of the most famous, whom I've debated several times, as you say, is Richard Dawkins. And he just says this is the way the world is.
Yet, you people really don't care about that, do you? Because you're really just concerned over how you think the world should be, not is, how your emotional state desperately wishes that it was. And that's kind of a problem that you simply won't acknowledge because your feelings are more important to you than the facts are. The world is the way that the world is. You aren't remotely important to that conclusion. Only observation and objective evaluation are. You people are very, very, very bad at both of those things. And that's kind of sad, isn't it?
It's
Hmm.
exactly what you'd expect if at the bottom there's no good, no evil, no justice. And I'm just quoting a short bit. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. So his conclusion is that there's no good and no evil. And yet he's perfectly aware that he's a moral being and he makes moral judgments.
And this is about the point where they go completely off the rails. They can't understand that, of course, because the religious poison that has corrupted their minds makes it completely impossible. But they are convinced that there is an objective morality somewhere out there that they can't actually demonstrate. It just has to be there because it makes them feel good to think that there is, and they interpret absolutely everything that anyone else says through that corrupted lens. Now, I'm not going to speak for Dawkins because he's perfectly capable of doing it on his own, but in this particular case, let me give you my take. I have no reason whatsoever to think that there is an objective good or an objective evil, but I am certainly entitled to my own view on the subject. And I can make my own subjective pronouncements on things that I think are good or bad, or things that I think are good or evil, or however you want to phrase it, and others are certainly welcome to disagree. This is the very basis of having rational conversations. We find a subject on which we disagree, and then we talk it out until we can come to an intellectual understanding. Or not, as the case may be. But when it comes to people like Lennox and Turek and many others of their ilk, they can't see things that way. There has to be a singular moral standard that their imaginary friend came up with, and therefore they point to anyone who disagrees and pretend that, well, obviously they're wrong because obviously the apologist mind can't be. And this is why talking to these people, talking to the religious who believe things like this, is such a complete waste of time, because they're not even conversant in the same language that we're speaking, are they?
So it seems to me that atheism, certainly in his version of it, and that of many others indeed, runs into a self-contradiction, denying morality and yet wanting there to be, and thankfully living as moral people.
No, that's entirely wrong. We're just disagreeing that there is a singular objective moral standard out there anywhere. That's your shtick, not ours. We're just pointing out that we're more moral than you are because we can actually look at the real world and judge the consequences of our actions against a standard that we ourselves select. If what we're doing harms others, we can change our actions and reevaluate our position on morality. Whereas the religious can't do that because they've bought into a nonsensical idea that morality comes from the invisible lips of some magic man in the sky, and whatever God says goes, whether it hurts people or not. And that's why, if you go through history and look at all the worst, most rationally unjustifiable horrors that man has ever visited upon other men, the overwhelming majority of them come from religion and religious-style faith-based thinking. It's what happens when you can't have a rational conversation. It's what happens when might makes right authoritarian thinking becomes the norm. Now, that's not all on religion, but let's be honest, an awful lot of it is. And it's not like these two shouldn't have figured that out by now, because certainly it has been explained to them time and time again. But they don't really give a damn, do they? They've got a flock to fleece. They've got people to lie to. They've got their hands out for your money. Who cares if any of this is actually applicable in reality? Certainly not them.
Now, if we analyze that, one of the most helpful people on that was actually the man that I quoted or hinted at earlier, who said he couldn't imagine anybody with real character hadn't suffered, was Dostoevsky. And he once put into the mouth of one of his characters, God, if there is no God, everything is permitted. In other words, there's no rational base for morality if God does not exist.
No, that's the only way that there is a rational basis for morality. If morality is just a matter of God issuing proclamations from on high, then there is no morality because it's all just authoritarian bullying. It's just God saying that it's right because God says it's right, or it's wrong because God says it's wrong. It's the guy with the biggest stick wins the fight. If I can kick the crap out of you, then I win every single argument. Except that's not actually moral. That's abusive, in fact. It's even worse because there's no evidence whatsoever that there is a God of any kind to begin with. The only thing that we have to go by are these two doofuses who are going to tell us what they think God wants and hold everybody else accountable to their own undemonstrated, irrational, illogical proclamations. Well, how the hell do they know what God supposedly wants? Well, it says so in the Bible. Well, how did the people who wrote the Bible know that? It's always the problem that we face. It's convenient that the gods always want the same things that their followers do, or the people who are leading their followers, because it always comes down to that. It's always the priesthood who gets to tell us what God really wants, which conveniently is the same thing that the priests want. How convenient. So the real question we have is, why should we listen to John Lennox? Why shouldn't we pay attention to the people who are over there muttering to a rock? Maybe the rock god has it all right. Maybe the tree gods have it right. Maybe none of them have it right. Until someone can prove not only that their deity is real in the first place, but that they actually have worthwhile takes on morality, why should we pay the slightest bit of attention to any of them at all?
And I firmly believe, having been to Russia many times and discussed it with Russian people, that this is absolutely right. Now, what we've got to face is this. Atheism thinks it solved the problem by saying there isn't a problem. This is just how the world is.
Because by every single shred of evidence that we have, that happens to be the case. Ultimately, all of this comes down to, but I'm not getting my way. You can't even get all of the Christians to agree on what their imaginary friend wants. Why in the world would we take your word for it over the word of someone else? And that's ignoring all the other hundreds or thousands of religions out there who are all saying completely different things based on what they wish was true. If you notice, every single religion out there, including Christianity, they're all self-serving because all of their followers are self-serving. They're saying the things that will benefit them, not that actually benefit humanity. At least with secular morality, we can go out and look at what is best for humanity, or with what is best for the particular pocket of humanity, the culture or society in which you live and with which you are concerned. We can go and look at that by some subjective metric, and then we can tailor our actions to meet that goal that we've all agreed on. Because there really is no evidence that there's anything else going on, and that's what all of this has to come down to. Evidence. Things that are actually demonstrably true in the real world. We are concerned about that. They are not. I wonder why.
Now, it removes the problem in one sense, but it also doesn't remove the suffering. It's still there. But it certainly does remove all hope.
In fact, it's the only thing that doesn't, at least if you're not concerning yourself with empty platitudes. The only people who are going to demonstrably help you are other people. If you're in Africa starving, it isn't some god running down from on high with a cheeseburger that's going to save you. It's the people pulling up in trucks with crates of food and seeds and modern methods of growing more. In fact, what religion does is it makes you satisfied with not having food in your belly to begin with. Well, it's God's will. You're a worthless sinner. You don't deserve food. You deserve to have botflies eating your children's eyeballs. It's all in God's grand design. And that's really just dumb. It really, really is. Why do you have cancer? Because God wanted you to. Don't look over there at all those people involved in cancer research who are trying to wipe it out. The religious don't like to talk about them, do they? Or if they do, well, they're doing God's will. God wants to wipe out cancer. Well, why can't God just do that without the help of humanity? Isn't he God? These people are just idiots. It's really sad watching just how many of them fall for this complete and utter crap.
Now, that doesn't prove that atheism is false, but nor does it prove it's true.
It just proves that it's effective. Right about now, I'm pretty good with effective. All you people have are childish threats and empty claims and no means whatsoever to prove that anything that you're pretending makes the slightest bit of sense. Because this is really where we keep having these problems. You people keep telling the faithful to pray to God for salvation, but it's only when those trucks pull up with people in them and modern technology that the problems actually get solved. We don't need your God. We're doing pretty well on our own. In fact, there's no evidence that your God has ever done anything of any value ever in the entire history of the universe, or that it even exists in the first place. All you have are your stories and your prayers that succeed at a rate no better than random chance. If you're thinking that's impressive, I don't know what to tell you, because it's not. It's just not.
And while I've come across these logical problems within atheism, and I've written a great deal about them, especially in my book, Gunning for God, there is a source of hope in Christianity that I believe doesn't lead to contradictions.
Except there isn't. Just because you desperately want to believe there's an invisible spook in the sky that's going to magically solve all your problems, you sure the hell can't prove it. He's certainly not doing anything impressive if he's even there. How's ending world hunger going for you people? Because as I said before, most of your rhetoric is telling people to live without. If God wants to give it to you, then you'll get it. Otherwise, he's just saying no. How exactly is that any different than nothing going on at all? How is that hope? It's not. It's teaching satisfaction with failure. God has never cured a single disease, ever. God has never demonstrably ended a single drought, period. What is it that your God is actually doing that you people can actually prove? And the answer to that is not a thing. You people are idiots.
And actually, the irony of it is this, that here we see very brave people, and I think we ought to be deeply thankful for them, the medics and nurses and hospital people on the front line. But these hospitals and hospices originally were a legacy of Christianity.
Not really. Of course, this is just John trying to take credit for things that his religion has absolutely no part in. Yes, once upon a time, religion did some things, mostly because said religion had a stranglehold on society, and you pretty much had to be part of that religion, or they'd string you up and kill your ass. It's been a long time since then, though, during which all of the developments that have come about have had absolutely nothing at all to do with Christianity. It's like the people who are trying to take credit for Big Bang cosmology because a Catholic priest came up with the basic idea. Yeah, but that was a very, very long time ago, and a whole lot has happened since then. You people, you just haven't kept up.
Perhaps it's worth exploring what Christianity has to say if it has left us such a wonderful legacy of medical help, so to speak. So I'm not an atheist because I see it as a hopeless philosophy, but I also see it as an illogical philosophy.
Hold up. Let me get this straight. You believe in an imaginary man in the sky that does nothing of any demonstrable substance. You think said non-demonstrable entity provides us with morality, which of course you can't prove, and gives people legitimate hope, which again you can't show. And now you're trying to take credit for modern medical science because once upon a time some crazy believers had a tiny, minuscule little part in it, and since then science has taken over and has had no need for you or your asinine beliefs ever since. And then you're calling atheism illogical. Sure, yeah, okay, whatever you say, John. Because this is where we have to ask, are you actually listening to any of the crazy things coming out of your mouth? Because we are, and we're just laughing at your ass. This is why religion, Christianity in particular in this case, is dying a slow and painful death. Because these people are patently stupid. There's no other way to describe it. These two, and it's mostly John Lennox in this case, but Frank Turek gets splashed by his bullcrap too. You two are just a complete absurd joke.
And that we could go into more detail about. But I turn to something that gives a much better explanation of the situation, although it's a deeper thing. And because I reject the atheist solution, I have a problem. I have a problem believing in a God who is ultimately responsible for creating a world in which such things happen.
Well, you do have a problem, that's for certain. You believe asinine, unsupportable things based on your fee-fees like an immature little child. And this is why they don't actually talk to us like rational, intellectual, critical thinking adults. It's why they spend all of their time down at the kiddie pool with the rest of the crazy Christians, because we're not going to stroke their egos and pat them on the head and tell them that it's all going to be okay. Because we actually care about the facts, and they, sadly, don't. This is why people like Frank Turek and John Lennox are little more than laughingstocks around here. Because we don't take their crap seriously, because they've never proved that their crap doesn't smell. It's really sad just how many people actually do, though. People who clearly have never thought intellectually about the words that are coming out of their mouths. Because this isn't about intellect. It's all about emotion. It's about feeling happy all the time, whether the things that make you feel good are actually correct or not. Because they don't actually care about any of that, do they? I've had a couple of conversations recently with theists over John Lennox, and I don't think most Christians can even stomach Frank Turek anymore, but it's amazing just how limited their knowledge is, or their ability to think critically about the claims that John Lennox makes. Because they just want him to be right. They just want to believe in Christianity. Whether it's true or not, they don't care. It just doesn't matter. They just want it to be true. And that is just dumb. If John Lennox can make it sound reasonable in air quotes there, so long as you don't think about it too hard, well, they'll just go along for the ride, because ultimately it's only their feelings that matter, not whether the crap in their heads actually comport with objective reality. That part doesn't really make a difference, and it's hard to express just how absurd that is, which is why it's so hard to come up with good videos to go after a lot of the time, because most of them are just like this. This is the kind of stuff that we get, because it's all dumb, it's all faith-based, emotion-coddling, asinine garbage that can't be defended in any intellectual way. Because that's what Christianity is, and anyone who has the guts and the brains to look at it critically, they'll know that, and they probably won't be Christians anymore. You can't take these two jokers seriously, because they definitely lack that capacity. That's kind of a shame, but luckily the world is growing up around them, and soon they'll be left in the dust, crying in their playpen because the world just isn't fair. And won't that be a wonderful day?
Boom, 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 boom. bum.